Today we're talking about my favorite dictator, the Bishop of Rome, the Vicar of Jesus Christ, the successor of the Prince of the Apostles, and then on about like 10 different titles, as well as servant of the servants of God. We are always, of course, talking about the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, as well as the head of state for the Vatican City or the Holy See. It's a really complicated stuff, but most of it doesn't matter because it's a small nation. It's a pretty much insignificant nation that wouldn't matter if they didn't have more than a billion or hundreds of millions of believers across the world. And of course, the current pope died either yesterday or basically today. It was announced he died. It might have happened yesterday or today, and people across the world are being sad about it. But when you go into the history of this pope, I don't think there's anything to be said about any pope pretty much dying. That the whole institution should be gone. As any religion, it has very little value, and we should try to move on from there. We'll talk about some of his comments on Israel, since that's what we're covering, but also we'll cover some of his stuff when it comes to general philosophy and also his sort of enforcement of the Catholic doctrine or whatever you want to call it. Uh, and for that special occasion, somebody who knows a lot about the Catholic Church, James Valiant. Hey, James, thank you for joining me today. I'll go to you, but I'll bring up just the first thing so we can talk about it. Is again his comments on Israel. He called for a ceasefire just recently, I think like a few days or a few weeks ago before he died. But also he called for a ceasefire the month that it happened. At the end of October 2023, he was already calling for a ceasefire again, and it's the same kind of. I mean, I can read the quote. He said, "We too, like Father Ibrahim, say ceasefire. Stop, brothers and sisters. War is always a defeat, always, always." And again, that talks about the sort of almost like a childish view of the world, refusal to see what's really happening, and this sort of, you know, calling for peace is something beauty pageants do when they, say what they want for. Not something I would expect from, if not world leaders, which he is not really. He is sort of the spiritual leader of the world, and that is not the kind of thing we should want from our spiritual leaders calling for surrender against terrorism. But James, what do you make of his comments on Israel? And where were you when you learned that the Pope died?
I was here in my home and got it from the news, and everyone is going to be commenting on the mystical significance of the Pope dying on Easter, although he was obviously an old man who'd been very sick for a long time. For those who are squeamish on this issue, for those who are squeamish about religion in general and would take offense, let me just give a little warning now. This is probably not the podcast for you. The doctrines that this man advocated are anti life, life hating, and his specific comments about the war in the Middle East really show that up. This man would have Israel go through another Holocaust at the hands of Hamas and Hezbollah. You turn the other cheek. This is consistent. I have to give him, this is one area. He's not, through the course of his life, he was very inconsistent. This is one area where he was perfectly consistent with the doctrine of Jesus. You turn the other cheek, even if it means you die. You can't. The original Catholic doctrine from Saint Augustine, between Augustine and Aquinas, was that you die rather than kill in self-defense. Even in reasonable self-defense, it's a sin. Augustine could understand why someone would do it, but he couldn't read any exception to turn the other cheek, love your enemies, submit to the evildoer, that sort of stuff that you read from Jesus in the New Testament. And of course, the Catholic Church, of all the Christian denominations, is the one with the most tenuous hold, let's put it that way, on the New Testament. It's up to the Church, it's ecumenical councils, and to some degree the Pope, who decides the meaning of the Bible. But in this specific case, obviously, he is no fan of justice or defeating those who would slaughter you. And that's the real meaning of Christian doctrine. When you submit to evil, you sanction evil. When you you turn the other cheek, what you do is get killed. You know, pacifism, you know, nonviolent resistance when it comes to, say, Gandhi or Martin Luther King only works because there is an American or a British population whose heartstrings, whose trained altruistic heartstrings you can play on. Had it been Hitler, Gandhi would have been sent to the gas chambers or a concentration camp immediately. No, sanctioning Hamas is obviously not good. The only thing that's going to give us peace, if you see, he really doesn't want peace on earth. He doesn't believe there can be good conditions here on earth. Life on earth is a veil of tears, a matter of suffering that we just have to accept and, in fact, cherish suffering. He was a suffering worshiper, like all Christians are. When it comes to the church in general, we're at Ayn Rand Center, UK. I would highly recommend two essays by Ayn Rand, Of Living Death and A Requiem for Man, where she takes on Catholic doctrine in the 1960s. And it's really interesting, both on abortion and on their socialism. The Catholic Church has always been opposed to capitalism, always been opposed to material progress. They were very harshly opposed to the scientific revolution. They've had to come down a bit from their high horse on that, but they still consistently advocate for suffering and misery on this earth. And his position on Hamas is perfectly consistent with that. Even if it means you suffer and die, you suck it up and suffer and die, rather than fight back. Now, of course, the church hasn't been consistent on this. 1,000 years ago, a pope called for the Crusades, who called for war. In fact, the Pope gave all kinds of, dispensations and special favors to people who were going to war in the Middle East to get the Holy Land back from the Muslims after their second conquest of the area. The popes have sanctioned war. The Catholic Church has sanctioned slavery of Native Americans and Africans through the course of their history. It's only, Christians who can't be enslaved, said the popes 500 years ago. So the Catholic Church changes its face many times over. They used to advocate the torturing and burning of heretics alive. So suffering on earth has never been a problem for the Catholic Church. It is hardly surprising that he would advocate no response to October 7th, even if it might mean October 7th after October 7th after October 7th. There's another thing I think that plays into this, is we're seeing mystic leaders sort of in a solidarity with one another. When the mystics ruled the world, of course, Protestant heretics were the enemy, and they could be tortured and burnt at the stake. But now they're so ecumenical, the religion has become, that anyone who's a mystic, anyone who's religious, he's reaching out to, if it's the Eastern Orthodox. For more than 1,000 years, there's been a split with the Eastern Orthodox Church, and over the last 500 years with the Protestants, of course. And the funny thing is, this Pope was the first Jesuit Pope. The Society of Jesus, in short, the Jesuits, were created in the wake of the Reformation. They were the most aggressive in calling Protestants heretics in those sectarian differences. This Pope has famously said that atheists can get into heaven. Now, think about it. Have all those sacraments that sort of get you your leg in the door in purgatory so you have a chance at heaven. What became of all that? What became of all the talk about Protestants, even, variant Christians being heretics condemned to hell? What about the Pope's ritual of excommunication? He throws down his shepherd staff and he condemns you to hell, the flames of hell. That's what excommunication is all about. You see, he's the successor of St. Peter. Jesus in the Gospels gave Peter, his disciple, the keys to the kingdom. And so that's been interpreted to mean that the Pope, who claims to be the successor of St. Peter, can decide who gets into heaven and who doesn't. Well, this Pope said atheists can get into heaven. This Pope said, remarkably, this Pope said that gay unions, although they can't go through the liturgical formal marriage ceremony, the church can bless their unions and stuff. That is coming way down. So the church can totally change their doctrine. Now get this, of course, we're always told that religion provides us with this eternal truth, this morality that never changes. It changes, and it changed all the time. From century to century, it changes. There's nothing eternal about it. God apparently is slowly spinning out his revelation of the truth to humanity. But this Pope in particular has been evil in my mind. He advocated evil doctrines. He was a enemy of capitalism, materialism. He was big on global warming. And when it comes to war and peace, of course, he wants Israel to just lay down and die. The military response, which is the only thing that will stop these savages. But you see, he'd have to admit that mysticism is the problem, was the source of that savagery. It's mysticism that is, of course, consistent with the kind of violent force that the Catholic Church engaged in for many, many centuries. And it is, of course, what inspired the same mysticism, the same anti life, anti this world doctrine is precisely what he tells people to accept when it comes to Hamas's attack on October 7th. Ceasefire now, of course. Of course, you don't fight back. And of course, that is to sanction evil. That is to encourage evil and more violence. But you, your individual soul, won't get corrupted, you see, by violence, even in self-defense. So it is a truly evil doctrine. The man advocated true evil through the whole course of his career. And I have a hard time shedding a tear for anyone who so openly, so aggressively advocates for passivity and sanctioning of the evil of Hamas, for example, or the evil of Islamicism and jihadism in general, and is willing to compromise on everything but mysticism and altruism itself. And on that, he took a very, very strong line and continued to take a very, very strong line. But mysticism and altruism, which have been partners in crime for millennia now, are the things that he held fast to. And those are the doctrines that are truly evil. And as I say, if you want Ayn Rand's view of Catholic Church doctrine, she wrote 2 essays, the papal encyclicals that involved, human life. She called it Of Living Death, I think very appropriately, and the papal encyclical Populorum Progressia, which is the progress of humanity, where he talked about economic policy. Ayn Rand understood that the Catholic Church was an enemy of life on earth, called for living death, in effect, in their various doctrines. And that's what this Pope consistently advocated for, living death, and literal death in the case of Israelis.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. A super chat from Equal to Reality. Thank you so much. He says, my only reaction to this event is, oh no. Anyway, and also a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, James, will you be lighting any morning candles for him?
No. I do not think there's any significant mystic significance to the ritual, any metaphysical substance to the lighting of candles, which of course Catholics do. All you have to do is walk into a Catholic church to see the lit candles for the death of, and when someone dies, I'm nearly all the time sympathetic, regardless of what their beliefs might be. An ordinary human being has a context, and I have to judge based on that context. And so I have all kinds of sympathy for those who do go to church to light candles for their loved ones, if they are sincere Christians and want to do so. But it is a mystic ritual I have no respect for in itself, even though I have respect for grieving people in general. But this is a guy I cannot grieve. This is a guy I cannot grieve. He advocated ideas that are harmful to humanity, truly evil doctrines. He did not have any correct response to nearly anything except, allowing atheists into heaven, that's swell. But what he's trying to do is, kind of snooker atheists back into church. But in the process, being a complete hypocrite to his own doctrine. I was surprised to see today, I have friends who are on the left, let's put it that way, through my criticism of Christianity. And these harsh critics of Christianity, people who are atheists or call themselves agnostics, were mourning the Pope because of his political and social doctrines. Atheists need to abandon altruism, but they haven't. You can see in doctrines like communism, which really enshrine Christian ethics as a political doctrine. And for many on the left, their politics is their religion, So the Pope can be forgiven They don't get the connection between mysticism and actual policies that hurt people here on earth. But this pope, like every other pope before him, was a suffering worshiper. And I cannot abide suffering worshipers and leaders, intellectual or spiritual leaders who call for human suffering so nakedly. I'm sorry, I can't shed a tear or light a candle for.
And just to build upon the sort of anti-capitalist nature of pretty much all religions, I mean, people should really look up the money speech, Francisco Money speech from Atlas Shrugged. There's also a YouTube video which has some Christians sort of trying to defend it. No, no, no. It's not it's not that money is evil. It's just the love of money that is the root of all evil. And to those people, they should really sort of ask a question, but what is the root of all money, which is again in the Francisco speech. And that really talks about because, you know, sort of to put it in my words, because what is money? It's just a representation of production. It's just a representation of excess production that we were able to extract and put aside. And any sort of trade for money can only be made in a society where there are people who are able to produce, not steal, because even when you steal, you are stealing somebody's production, somebody's actual capabilities. And if that is what you consider the root of all evil, or even the love of it, because what does the love of it represent? The love of money represents the love of production, the love of society that makes production possible. And therefore, if you hate money, you will have anti-capitalist views, because what is capitalism about rather than protection of individual rights, of individual production, of individuals' right to life on this earth, not on some mystical plane somewhere else?
That's it. Money is a great innovation. It facilitated the division of labor and the increased prosperity of humanity. Money did so much to improve the human condition. It made possible the division of labor, and therefore anything different than sort of a Stone Age nomadic existence or subsistence existence. Human existence before the innovation of money was miserable. When money was introduced, people could specialize and get good at their specialization and trade in something more sophisticated than, say, barter. If you love life on earth, you would love money and the innovation of money. Now, of course, the church has been using money itself, has been demanding money, giving money. 500 years ago, the church would sell indulgences. You could get forgiveness of sins for a price. They actually, about 500 years ago, the church issued a menu for the price. You give this much money to the church and you'll be forgiven for this crime. And as the crimes got, the sins got more serious, the price tag got higher. So the church has been perfectly willing to sully its hands by taking money. In fact, you go to the Vatican, you'll see all of this gilt and gold, all this expensive art, all of this, they're hugely wealthy. And of course, they know they need money to keep in business, but that doesn't stop them from condemning money. But if you do read the New Testament, Jesus was an advocate of poverty. Poverty, miserable life on earth was what Jesus advocated. Don't worry about what you eat, what you wear. That's this world. Keep your focus on the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor. It's the poor who are the fortunate. It's hard. It's as hard for a rich man to get into heaven as it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. A rich young man came up to Jesus and said, "What? I've obeyed all the commandments. What else do I need to do to get into the kingdom?" And he said, "Well, give away all your money to the poor." And so Jesus was an advocate of poverty, just as St. Paul said that money was the root of all kinds of evil. So it is that material. See, it's not money per se, because you see, even the apostles had a purse, but you see, they owned, according to the Book of Acts, the apostles kept all their property in common. They were, in effect, proto-communists. And so, but it's not money per se, or the use of money per se, that they're opposed to. They can have a menu for, the price of sins, as it were, 500 years ago. And that was part of what the Protestants really objected to, one of their many criticisms of the corruption of the church at that point. But the point is that Christianity is really opposed to happiness and prosperity here on earth. If you love this life, if you love life on earth, then you're not going to be focused where you need to be on the church, on getting into heaven, which is where our central focus should be according to the New Testament and according to the Catholic Church. So this Pope didn't like was our consumerism, our materialism, our quest to improve the material conditions of life on earth. He was morally opposed to happiness on earth. That's why for a long time the church, and this Pope did not technically change their doctrine on abortion at all. When it comes to abortion and birth control, you are a slave. You are just a pawn in God's greater plan. And if you have to suffer and suck it up and be miserable, so be it. Regard yourself as blessed. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who are persecuted. If you're in a nasty condition here on earth, in the New Testament, they advocate slavery. And in fact, St. Paul at one point in one of the pseudo-Pauline epistles, but in one of the letters ascribed to Paul, Paul says slavery is a great thing because it's a special opportunity to get into heaven, to show how much misery you can put up with here on earth. Even a harsh master is a blessing if you're a slave. That is the consistent strain of mystical hatred for life on earth that the New Testament represents and Christianity represents in general, and the Catholic Church in particular. The Catholic Church isn't like one of these contemporary American Protestant sects which say prosperity is a divine right or success is a good thing. Any doctrine like that, this Catholic Church and this Pope in particular was opposed to. And so it makes perfect sense that he was advocating for turning the other cheek in the wake of October 7th. The man it doesn't faze him a bit if one group commits atrocity. Condemn the atrocities, technically that's awful, but you have no right, you have no business to fight back. You have no business to destroy Hamas, the source of this, at all. That's, suffering this is an opportunity. This is a salvation opportunity to suffer here on earth. So it's perfectly consistent with his life-hating doctrine. He was a life hater. So I'm supposed to shed a tear for a man who advocated policies that would entrench poverty, misery, and cause the worst kind of violent dictators and thugs to walk over the world? No, it's an evil doctrine. And this man advocated, as consistently as someone could in the 21st century, a perfectly inconsistent, contradictory, and truly evil doctrine. So no, I'm not going to shed a tear, one little tear, or light one little candle for him.
We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, "Wonder who will be the next pope." Well, there are already bets on it. If you'd like to take, it's gonna be someone from the. Oh, well, technically, it could be anybody. They could
Right.
pretty much
You
appoint
don't need to be a
anybody.
bishop or a cardinal to be pope. You don't need to be a bishop to be a cardinal. But in 4 to 6 days, there will be the funeral of the Pope. And within the next couple of weeks, they'll start the conclave. All the cardinals from all around the world, it's the College of Cardinals that elects the Pope. And so all the cardinals from all around the world will meet in Rome roughly 2 weeks hence, and they'll go through several ballots. And as long as it takes, they'll keep taking votes until they get a new Pope. Now, recently, something back in the old days that could take days and days and days and days and days, often involved political bribery, graft, what they called simony. But I have a feeling that this will be, like most recent elections for Pope, a lot more efficient and quick. But it'll be interesting because it'll be a chance. The doctrinal tug of war goes on within the church. A political tug of war goes on within the church. And the conclave, they have to shut you up in the Vatican, and it is a private sequence of votes. And of course, every time when they burn the little votes, up comes the black smoke, and when they finally get a pope, up will come the white smoke. So I don't know, in 2.5 to 3 weeks, we'll see the white smoke coming up from the conclave in the Vatican, and that will signal that they've elected a new pope.
And also, I think somebody in the chat was asking what would make a good pope, or sort of what could make a potentially sort of like a better Pope, but I think that's one of the positions where it's like there is no way to do your job well. Your job itself is already, I mean, to sort of going into the secular world, it's sort of like being the chairman of the Fed. Like there is no right
Right. There's
policy.
no good Fed policy, right? There's no good Christian leadership. That's a very, very good comparison, actually. Only it's much, much, much worse. There is no good way to, I would urge people, since I'm recommending articles by Ayn Rand, I highly recommend an early essay by Ayn Rand called Faith and Force, Destroyers of the Modern World. So long as you are and I don't see how the church can change that aspect. Uh, it's faith and force that go hand in hand. You can see it with the Pope saying, "Don't use force when Hamas commits atrocities and aggression." See, the force that he's sanctioning is a force that is truly evil and that he might even criticize. But you see, that's a salvation opportunity. All the greater the blessing. Blessed are you when you're how fortunate you are. Lucky you to be persecuted. Lucky you to have a harsh slave master. You see, there is no Christianity is the opposite of objectivism in every single one of its particulars, in its mysticism, in its supernaturalism, in its aggressive altruism, in its advocacy of poverty and misery here on earth. It's all about getting into the next dimension. And so Christianity has to be uprooted completely, root and branch, from stem to stern. Christianity is just simply a doctrine inconsistent with the success or happiness of humans on this planet.
And sort of with that wrapping up, I think the sort of really the biggest problem of any sort of mysticism or any sort of religion is really this belief in some alternative reality, in some different world, because it really puts what we know is real. We know this world is real. We know this is actually what exists. And trying to put that as a secondary, as this is just a sort of like a prelude to the actual life, prelude to the actual life when you ascend, is really something you cannot really get more anti-life. You cannot really get more anti-life than when you put the actual life outside of or when you put what you believe is a life outside of the actual life. And that's there's a really great quote from We the Living when Kira is asked if she believes in God. And I could say the quote, but I could also recommend people checking out We the Living, which I think is a much better alternative. So make sure to check out everything we've said today when it comes to books and articles. I think all of it is really great source for actual life rather than whatever Christianity calls for. We also have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says first pope was Peter. I read, which I believe is true. So that is
There
a
was no such thing as the
oh
Catholic Church or popes in the first century. That is a retrospective mythology. First century popes were not popes. The bishops of Rome were a recreation of the imagination of early Catholics. But the tradition, the mythology is that Peter passed the torch to the next bishop of Rome and the next bishop of Rome, and so forth. So that's just part of the wider Christian myth of, but they need apostolic succession, to get that credibility, going all the way back to an apostle who, all these bishops that have, lines of succession going back to an apostle proves its legitimacy, you see. But it's just part of the mythos and legend of Christianity to establish their authority. What gives the Pope the authority to tell us these things? What gives all these ecumenical councils the power that the Pope calls the power to decide these questions? Well, we're the church if we're Christians, and we collectively can, to some degree, guided by God and the Holy Spirit, you see, because that's what we are. Or we have authorities like the bishops, and the Bishop of Rome in particular, who is the successor of St. Peter, to whom God gave the keys to the kingdom. You see, the Pope's coat of arms has got two keys, you see, but it's just a bunch of mystic falderall.
well, we as objectivists, or sort of any sort of Western liberal secular philosophy, get our understanding from the reality and our sort of governmental power from the consent of the governed and from understanding of individual rights. They get it from God. I think I'll take my chances when it comes to being right. With that, we have the reality show coming up in just about a minute. We'll finally be talking about the episode we had scheduled for a long time. So make sure to check out that. With that, James, any last thoughts and where can people find you?
Here, ARCUK, I'm doing seminars for ARCUK, but you have to be a paid member. So if you're not a paid member of Ayn Rand UK, I would highly recommend you do. You're going to get an opinion here that you're obvious, that you could just get a taste of right here, that you'll not find anywhere else. It won't be, for just as our reaction to the Pope's death is not going to be what you're going to find on either the right or the left. It's we consistently on a host of issues will give you a position you're not likely to find anywhere else.
And make sure to join in just a minute or so for the reality show where we'll be talking about the Jews for Jihad, specifically Katie Helper. So thanks, James, again. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and see you in a bit.
Be safe.